about to start and have a conversation about the universe and all its complications. Step right in, we've been waiting for you to say that you're confuddled. Ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da. Yeah, we've been waiting for you, waiting for you.
Hey, you're listening to Confuddled, the philosophy podcast where we talk about the deep and meaningful, be it pizza or existential crises, or even an existential pizza crisis. So get your pizza on and your crisis set and come join us for some fun.
Here's how it works. Every week we have a new topic, but only one of us knows what it is. This week I'm going to surprise Azul with the topic, and he has absolutely no idea what we're going to talk about.
No idea.
So this is completely off script. We have no script.
I am terrified.
Are you ready? Are you ready to find out what we're going to talk about this week?
I'm as ready as the people in Pompeii were when Vesuvius exploded.
Wonderful. Okay. I've decided to go classical this week, so we're going to talk about Marcus Aurelius.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, I'm interested. Go on. I'm excited.
So, for those of you who don't know, Marcus Aurelius was if you haven't watched the film Gladiator, I guess is where he's very famous.
He was in Gladiator?
He was in Gladiator. He was played by Richard Harris in Gladiator.
Wait, so was he who was he in the movie?
He was Marcus Aurelius.
So was he...
Marcus Aurelius was born in 121 and died in 180. He was a Roman emperor from 161 to 180, so he was an emperor for a very long time.
And this is BC or?
AD.
AD, okay.
AD. And he was the last of what was known as the five good emperors. And he was also a Stoic philosopher. So he was an exceptional ruler, and he was probably one of the most powerful men, if not the most powerful man on earth at the time. And he was a philosopher, and he was very conscious of not being corrupted by his power.
Was he the individual who wrote the Meditations, I think?
That's right.
Yes, I know him.
So he's most famous for being a Stoic philosopher and for writing the famous work Meditations, which has provided inspiration and a lot of help to many people throughout history. So the book's been of such help to so many. Yeah.
I personally haven't read it, but I hear it's quite a read.
It is. I mean, I've only read parts of it.
Right.
But I started looking into Marcus Aurelius, and that led me into Stoicism. So Stoicism is a classical philosophy, and it originated in Greece. And there's a few famous adherents throughout history, including Marcus Aurelius. And I had quite a mistaken view of Stoicism. So there's the expression of having a Stoic view of something. I was under the impression that you have no emotions. So you basically, if you have a Stoic view, you're very detached from emotions, and you're very no emotion whatsoever. And that sounded quite dull to me. But that is not what Stoicism is at all.
This is exciting because that's basically more or less what I thought it was as well. I mean, there is obviously more to anything, but
yeah.
Imagine.
But that's not strictly true.
Really?
So Stoicism was founded in Greece by Zeno of Citium in the early 3rd century BC, but it was most famously practiced by Epictetus, Seneca, and of course Marcus Aurelius. And the philosophy is extremely practical. So the more I started looking into it, the more I realized, oh wow, this is actually so practical for everyday life. And that's why I felt it was a really good topic to bring up in the podcast today.
No, this is interesting. So could you give us a rundown of what Stoicism is all about then?
So Stoicism, it's the philosophy that asserts that virtue is happiness, and that we should judge people based on behavior, on actions rather than words. And to sum it up, really, it says that we can't control external events, but we can control our reactions to external events. It reminds us that life is really unpredictable, that it's very short, and it teaches us how to be strong and in control of yourself, and to be able to be as peaceful and as happy as possible in life, even amidst adversity. And actually, that a lot of people turn to Stoicism when life gets very difficult, because it's a great tool for that. one of the most famous teachers of Stoicism, Seneca, he was enslaved for part of his life.
Wow.
And so he went through horrendous suffering,
Yeah.
but he came eventually I think he was freed, and he came through it. So, a lot of these leaders of Stoicism went through, a lot of suffering. So it really is been tested and tried, and it seems to have worked. And it works for a lot of people and helps a lot of people. Even today, there's a big resurgence in Stoicism now and its popularity.
I'm not surprised, to be honest, given the current state of affairs.
Yes, yeah. So it cut weird since the world, whenever the world goes a bit shaky, then people turn to the Stoics for wisdom.
We suddenly become Stoics all
Yes.
around.
So it also teaches that the source of dissatisfaction is in our reactionary senses and our sensory perception, rather than our use of reason. So it uses reason as a tool to overcome our dissatisfaction and our suffering, which is very classical philosophy.
Yeah,
isn't
that's
it?
fair.
Very Western.
It always goes down to reason with them, doesn't it?
And it doesn't worry about complicated theories about the world or about the universe and about existence, but its sole aim is to help us overcome destructive emotions and act on what can be acted upon, and to leave the rest that we can't control to nature. And it's somewhat bleak, but it's also quite positive at the same time, because it actually believes that we are here as humans to help each other and to do
Right.
good, and it's believes that the way to happiness is through attaining virtue. Or virtue is happiness. And so it's actually kind of positive in those lines, and it believes in living and aligning oneself with nature, and that nature wants us to do good to each other. So it's actually somewhat positive, and I was quite surprised to find that.
Okay. So in this regard, is virtue considered helping each other, or?
Yes, so, Seneca actually goes into a lot of detail about breaking down what virtue is in Stoicism, and there was
Right.
4 that he went into. So to answer your question, the 4 virtues in Stoicism are wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice.
That sounds very Greek.
It's very Greek, very Greek.
Yeah.
But you know what? After reading this, I'm quite a Greek geek.
Oh, yeah. Weren't you already?
I was
Yes.
already, but I did not expect this. This philosophy is so practical.
I am surprised by it as well. It definitely seems like it's something you can. I'm often more of when it comes to reading philosophy and being interested in philosophy, I'm more for asking the big questions and then spending the rest of the week trying to answer a question that you know that you can't answer, but you're still trying at the very least, right?
Yeah.
But this seems quite a different spin to the whole philosophy, because it essentially says whatever doesn't relate to you, just forget about it. It's not really directly affecting you, and so you should more focus on what's going around you and put yourself into the middle of the universe, if you will, or the center of the universe. Is that a right?
Well, actually, one of the teachings of Stoicism is sympatheia. So it's seeing yourself as part of the whole, seeing yourself as the whole. So we are a part of nature. It's to see ourselves as like one being.
Oh.
So we are the limbs of one human body.
Yeah.
Marcus Aurelius has a great quote, and he says, "Everything is interwoven, and the web is wholly. None of its parts are unconnected. They are composed harmoniously, and together they compose the world. One world made up of all things, one divinity present in them all, one substance and one law, the logos that all rational beings share." So you see there he's talking about our interconnectedness. He actually describes in another passage, describing us as almost being like that we need each other so much, and we're so interconnected that we're almost like 2 rows of teeth interacting, or eyelids, and that we're an integral part of like one human body.
Yeah,
But we're a
yeah.
part of nature, we're a whole. And that's why Stoicism always says that our purpose and our actions should be always for the common good.
Right.
So anything that affects the hive affects the bee.
So it's a very collectivist kind of.
It's very
mentality.
collectivist.
Yeah.
It's a cosmopolitan. It's like almost like it believes in like this whole cosmopolitan like network of nature. I thought I could share a few quotes from Marcus Aurelius today. This podcast is all about taking, having a few laughs and talking about the deep and meaningful, but hopefully we'll be able to take away something to apply to our own lives.
Oh, for sure.
So I think definitely with Marcus Aurelius, listeners will be able to take away something, and and also be able to, meditations is very easily accessible. So they were able to access Marcus Aurelius's work there and go into more depth, if they'd like to.
And I don't think, if I recall correctly, that it's not that hard to read either, is it, Alex? It's quite straightforward compared to other Greek scholars, at least.
No, it's actually quite a good and easy read. And yeah, lots of people throughout history, lots of leaders have been reported carrying it with them, in their saddlebags as consolation, and it helps people. It really does.
I remember our classics teacher, Mr. Bishop, being a big fan of Marcus Aurelius.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he always used to quote him, and I think he was one of his favorite people, I guess. Yeah.
Well, after looking into him more now, I can see why.
Are you fan number 2 now?
I'm a huge fan. It's there's so many. We can actually do a few episodes on Marcus Aurelius. There's just so much that we can discuss. But I thought we could start with a few quotes. For example, Marcus Aurelius says, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." And he actually emphasizes this again later on, saying, "Remember that very little is needed to make a happy life." I think that's very important for us to remember now, because we feel like we need so much, especially nowadays, to be happy. We need to have the right job, we need to have the right, or we need to have the certain amount of likes on our social media, we need to accumulate all these, achievements and things to make us feel like we're successful and that we're happy. But Marcus Aurelius says, no, you don't need those things. And he was the emperor of Rome. He was the Roman emperor, and he was the most powerful man at the time. If not one of the most powerful, So, and if you could say that very little is needed for a happy life, that's pretty powerful.
I think it's an idea, especially when considering social media, how too much connectedness leads to too little connectedness. I myself found recently, when I misplaced my phone, shall we say, that not having to always check on my phone and just see if people are messaging me is quite relaxing. Although at the same time, it kind of puts you in this position where you are isolated. And so it's almost like, given your day-to-day being, like surviving and just going through work and life, you are always connected to so many people. And sometimes you need some alone time. You need some time to stay back and just, not have to think about everything in the world, really.
It's really weird how being so connected, and I say connected with like air quotes,
right?
Connected, right? Through social media makes us feel so isolated.
Yeah.
And how being alone can make us feel connected.
Damn.
But like truly connected. When I say connected, they're truly connected with people.
It sounds quite. I don't know what to say to that. I mean, it's such a simple sentence and it seems antithetical, but really, it's quite true. But also, I think that's just the tip of the iceberg, to be honest. Because I think there's something more to it, surely, in terms of connectedness, at least.
What do you mean?
Well, I agree, at least from my perspective, being alone sometimes, just doing something by myself and just having some time to not have to interact with people is definitely a method that I use to feel more connected or feel more relaxed or feel more myself. But at the same time, I feel like if I were in that position for too long, I would also come back to that stagnant, too isolated kind of situation that you just mentioned social media causes you.
I guess, that's where Stoicism would bring in its virtue of temperance, of, everything in moderation, and also in recognizing that we're social animals. And that's what Stoicism always emphasizes, is that we are social and rational, animals. So we need each other. And in Stoicism, it's believed that nature wants us to help each other, wants us to cooperate.
Right.
And that when we don't cooperate, we're turning our backs on it's unnatural. We're turning our backs on nature. And it's all about living in harmony with nature. So it's almost I've noticed there's quite a lot of similarities between it and Buddhism, and even somewhat some principles in Taoism as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It does remind me of more Eastern philosophies, if you will, because of the whole the more community kind of idea behind it. But then when I think about it, perhaps not most, but a lot of Greek philosophers back in the day, like way old Greek philosophers starting from Plato and so on, and even Aristotle, did believe in community, didn't they? I mean, Aristotle was the one who said we are social animals, if I recall correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, so this is what the Stoics say, and Marcus Aurelius says. And actually, the more I research philosophy and religion and different religions, the more I find very, very, very common themes, and very common conclusions, but they arrive there through different approaches. So yes, many mystical traditions and religions, for example, always talk about the oneness of life and how we're not separate, we're not isolated, we're all part of one being, or we're so interconnected that we cannot see ourselves as isolated. Buddhism is a great example with this. It doesn't believe there's such a thing as an isolated and separate self.
Right.
It believes everything is mutually interdependent and connected. And Marcus Aurelius, as I said in that quote, he says everything's interwoven, and it's all one web, and we're part of one body. But he's got such great wisdom that I'd love to share another quote with you. And
Go for
hopefully,
it, yeah.
So this is what. So Stoicism says, and Marcus Aurelius and Seneca say that it's not events in themselves and external things that make us feel unhappy. Rather, it's our judgments of them that make us feel unhappy. And we can relinquish our judgments of them at any moment and be free.
Right. I see. So that does make sense to me. And in fact, it does come down to the whole perspective of things, right?
Yeah.
If you go into a job interview, and you fail that job interview and then go out and just be depressed for the next whole month, you're taking a negative perspective to it and you're really causing yourself trouble. On the other hand, if you view it in a more positive light, thinking, well, I tried and I got experience and the next one's going to be better, then you're actually creating luck for yourself in a weird roundabout way. So is that the kind of thing that you mean by judgments of events?
Yeah, in a way. But they don't shy away from the harsh realities of life. That's why it's very appealing to a lot of people, because it's very realistic. It just sees life for what it is. And it says, there's a famous another passage from our friend Marcus saying, when you wake up in the morning, you're going to have to remember that people are going to be vindictive, they're going to be angry, they're going to be manipulative. And actually, negative visualization is a very important part of Stoicism as an exercise to imagine the worst outcome of things and to say, okay, really, is it that bad if everything just, everything hits the fan?
Our friend Marcus, huh?
Yeah, our friend Marcus. Yeah, so it's very realistic. So it doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of life, but it tries to find a way to deal with them in the most effective way possible.
And what is that way, out of curiosity?
Well, according to Marcus...
Sorry to cut you off, but it is somewhat weird to just call him Marcus.
Good on Marcus. I feel like he's a buddy of mine now.
Yeah, Marcus, he
Mr. Aurelius.
He just called me yesterday, told me to come down to his match and, have a barbie and, the usual.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I love about meditations. His work.
Barbecue?
Because the barbecue. I mean, he tells you how to do a real good barbecue.
I hope it's very well cooked.
Oh yeah, medium rare to perfection.
Oh yes, that is the best.
Anyone who doesn't do it medium rare is mad.
You are not eating steak properly if it's not medium rare.
No, you got to have a medium rare.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not compromising on this at all. No, meditations is really amazing because it's a personal look into this man, into his life, and you feel like you really connect with him, and he's telling you what he's learnt from life. And it was written in the last, I think, not too long before he died.
Oh, wow.
So he has a lot of, gathered a lot of wisdom, and he shares all that he was taught. But his advice for how to be happier, he says, quoting him, "All you need are these: certainty of judgment in the present moment, action for the common good in the present moment, and an attitude of gratitude in the present moment for anything that comes your way.
He was a poet as well, clearly. Attitude of gratitude.
Attitude of gratitude, that sticks in your
that's
head, right?
Amazing, yes.
Yeah. But I mean, the teaching is very simple, but they can be very hard to, apply to your life.
Yeah, I would say most complicated things seem simple at first, and then, or the other way around, most simple things are really complicated. Haha.
True.
I mean, because it's easy said than done, isn't it? When
Oh
it
yeah,
comes down
always.
to
I
it.
mean, this is something you have to practice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so Stoicism is very rooted in the present moment. So one of the things it teaches is to be established in the present, which is something we have control over somewhat, and to recognize what we don't have control over, the past and the future. And we're taught to live now and to live our best life now, because that's all we've got. Because it emphasizes how useless it is to focus on the future and the past, which we have absolutely no control over. We should think of the past as dead, and all the life that we've lived up to now as gone, as dust, and live what we have left as best as possible. And that comes into our responses to situations. How can I live the best life possible in response to what's occurring?
I do understand it from the surface level, but when you dig a bit deeper, does that mean that you shouldn't think about the future and you should live in the present?
Well, I mean, of course, practically we need to think somewhat and plan with the future, but we get so dragged into the future that we're always suffering or, worrying about the future, anticipating what will happen in fear of it, or so excited about being in the future that we don't enjoy the present. We don't enjoy life. Life is happening now. It's not happening in the future. It's not happening in the past. It's happening right now. So it's telling us to, hey, wake up. You're right here, right now. Live this now as well as you can. And the way to do that is to act for the common good and to recognize what you do have control over and to leave what you don't have control over to nature.
That's fair. I mean, I can't argue against that.
Yeah, that's how practical it is. And that's what's so refreshing about it.
It does raise a few interesting questions, though, like what is really left up to nature and where should you stop trying and just give in to things?
Well, it's quite simple. Just recognize what you do have control over,
What
which
do
is
you-
very little.
I suppose, but what's the scheme we're thinking now? See, if you take the universe as your scale, pretty much everything you do in your whole life, which involves your friends and your friends' friends and your friends' friends' friends, would still be minuscule and very little. But if you're just involving, say, New Zealand, because we live here, that's going to be larger, right? You could affect much more than what you would have initially thought you could.
Well, it's recognizing, for example, that you don't control the events in your life, the things that happen.
Right.
Right?
So you don't control yourself, really. Well, you do control
But
yourself.
you can control yourself. That's what it's saying. You can control yourself and discipline yourself and your thoughts and your reaction to events rather than events themselves.
But
And
nothing else.
basically, I mean, you can control. And when it says control yourself, that means in your relationship with others. How do you relate to others?
Right, no, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense, yeah.
So even if someone is very angry and towards you, how your response to that, it actually gives you reasons on why. Seneca actually wrote a whole work on anger, and on neutralizing the emotion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I'm a big fan of that, to be honest. Most of the times when I get angry, I find myself being too lazy to be angry. And so
it takes a lot of energy, doesn't it?
It really
I can't be
does.
bothered being angry. Why?
I know it really takes so much effort that I'd rather just be like, yeah, whatever, and just
Yeah.
like move past it. It's just, who can be angry in the 21st century? Like, if you're going to be angry at every single thing that annoys you, you'll be angry for your whole life.
Hence the internet.
Right.
The internet is like the rife with that.
The internet, the cesspool of everything, as coined by Reddit.
Yes, it's the cesspool of everything.
Yeah.
Well, to share another quote with you, he who lives in harmony with himself lives in harmony with the universe.
Huh. So that's interesting, because my reading of that may be completely different to what your reading of that is.
And that's okay. I mean, it's philosophy, so what does it mean to you and how does it apply to your life? That's where it's important.
let's maybe not advocate for interpreting philosophical concepts in any way we want to.
Yeah, true. It's true. But I mean, it will apply. I mean, you're always going to have your unique perspective and interpretation of it. And actually, I've got another quote from good old Marcus here.
Yeah?
Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth.
See, ooh, I don't know if I should agree with that. I mean, I do agree with it, but also an opinion can be more correct than another opinion, right?
Yeah, but it's still, I guess, another opinion, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, well, like advocating that it is an opinion,
Mm.
it can be more correct or more incorrect than another opinion by still acknowledging that it's not objectively correct, because we're assuming that there is no objective truth. And based on the assumption that there is no objective truth, any statement made can only be ever reaching towards that objective truth. And so could a statement, an opinion, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
be more correct than another opinion based on Stoicism?
Well, I'd agree. I believe there is an objective truth. And I
really?
actually agree with what you're saying there, that you can make a statement that's probably closer to it. But I guess what he's saying there is not to take everything so seriously when you hear like someone's opinion about something, someone's perspective on something, to take it with a pinch of salt. It's almost like a detachment from all views, because that's always someone's opinion, someone's view. It was always seen through a lens, isn't it? It's always subjective when someone tells you something like, "Oh, this is a fact. This is this," and well, actually, that's their perspective. So I think it's a great cure for being very close-minded.
That's true. Yeah.
Because it always helps you to see, well, okay, that's just an opinion. That's just, it's not necessarily the truth. And it can help you to see things with an open mind. And I can see why that quote would be very useful for someone who rules. Because then you need to have quite an open mind and consider a lot of perspectives on different matters.
Yeah, I would probably advocate that most people should be open. I like being open-minded, and I think most people are relatively open-minded, but there are people who aren't open-minded, and so, I mean, we all find it hard when somebody proves us to be wrong or something.
Yeah, like, I can't tolerate people who can't eat steak medium rare. It needs to be eaten medium rare, Azul. Steak needs to be medium rare.
Did you know until I think 4 or 5 years ago, I used to always cook my steak very well done. Like so well done that it's like bordering charcoal.
It's like my dad likes it like that.
Really?
Actually, yeah. He would never, ever, he doesn't like it if it has any bit of pink in it.
See, in my defense, I did not know anything about meat at the time.
So you just thought, cook it.
Yeah,
it's unsafe.
Because most of what I had cooked had been chicken, and so
yeah.
Based on that logic, you want to cook it through and through.
Yeah.
And so I'd always cook it through and through. But then I discovered the joy of medium rare, and I never turned back.
You see, this isn't just a philosophy podcast. We touch on cooking, we touch on daily annoying things in life, and yeah, so we cover all bases here.
On an unrelated topic, if you like pineapple on pizza, stop listening right now.
Exactly, that's another thing. Well,
no, I'm joking. Please listen.
Again, according to Marcus, that's an opinion, not a fact. It's a perspective, not the truth.
I fundamentally disagree with that, but I am an open-minded individual, and I acknowledge that some people can be wrong. So, yes.
So, moving right along. So let's carry on to what other advice Marcus can give us for a happy life.
Go on.
So he says, when you rise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. Can you imagine if we did that every single morning? Do you think that would change your day?
Do I have time to do that every day?
I mean, it could take even 5 minutes. You just wake up.
I suppose. Saying that I don't have time is a bit of an excuse, I admit. I think I would definitely be happier if I could be bothered to do that. To be honest, like I am quite a millennial in that I can't be bothered to do a lot of things. So
I mean, he's texting right now as we're talking.
What? No,
he hasn't looked up at me once.
Oh wow, I see how it is. We're descending into lying now, are we?
Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth.
So if I were to say, Alex, you're a wonderful person, that's not true?
Well, that's a perspective. That's an opinion.
An opinion that could be false.
So again, I guess that's what's so good about this quote, is that it means you can't get too cocky. You're going to be humble, because if someone praises you, you're going to see, well, that's a perspective, that's an opinion. So you're never going to get too haughty or too confident, you know. You're always going to have humility. And also, if someone talks down to you, you're not going to take that too seriously either. So you'll probably have like a good level of self-esteem, I think, a healthy level from following that teaching.
That being said, dear listener, we all know that Alex loves when I compliment him.
I do. I'm blushing right now. I'm going bright red. I'm going medium rare. I'm going
Ooh,
medium rare.
Delicious. Okay, maybe a bit too far there.
So, yeah, I think that's a great practice to think, you know, every morning, what precious privilege it is to be alive.
I personally don't subscribe to this kind of lifestyle because I'm a bit too busy, I suppose. But I find that a lot of people nowadays are getting more into meditation. And part of meditation is thinking about, you know, you as you are and being happy with what you have and just thinking about life and the universe in just a calm and collected way. And that's brilliant, I think, because a lot of people find happiness through that.
I think it's worth 5 minutes of
Yeah,
your time.
yeah.
If it means that if you can spend 5 minutes thinking, you know what, life is really short. I'm really lucky to be alive right now. So many things could have happened.
Right.
I'm really lucky to be here right now. I'm lucky I'm awake. I could have died in my sleep. I'm lucky, and like life is so short, so I've still got time. I'm still here, and that helps bring your priorities into perspective for the day. And then you're like, oh, I mean, I can breathe. It's amazing. I've got a working body, working lungs. I can breathe and I can think. I can enjoy things and I can love. And
But see, I'm a pessimist, so I feel like spending 5 minutes of my day to be more happy would defeat the purpose of being sad.
well, Stoicism has an answer for you there, my
Really?
friend. Yes, because remember I said about negative visualization.
Yes.
So maybe you could spend every morning visualizing the worst possible outcomes that could happen in the day, and you'd be like, would it really be so bad?
Wait, only just the morning, not the whole day?
Well, the whole day. Yeah, you could spend the whole day thinking about it. But then you imagine the worst possible scenario,
Got that checked?
and then you think, well, you know, what is it really as bad as I think?
Right, so that's the part I need to focus on. I see.
Yeah, and then when things happen, then you know they're not as the worst possible outcome. You're like, oh, that's fine. And if they do happen, then you're prepared for it. You expected it.
Like I genuinely, I subscribe to that. I definitely do. I call myself a pessimist, and I am a pessimist, but that doesn't necessarily lead me to focus on what is negative. It just leads me to worry and think about the worst case scenario, prepare for it, and then if it doesn't happen, I'm happy. If anything more positive than the worst case scenario happens, I am happy. That's such a stress reliever, really.
Well, yeah. Well, there you go. And I think I've got another quote I'm going to
Ooh.
throw at you.
Yeah.
I was supposed to just pick one. Just one quote
You
that we
really
could
was.
discuss. I really was. But the thing is, there was just so many. I was like, oh, this is just brilliant. I wanted to share so many with you guys. And actually, there's still more. These are just the ones I've highlighted. There's still more that we could share in another episode if listeners are keen.
We should maybe keep Alex away from Marcus
Keep me
Aurelius.
away from Marcus Aurelius. I love this man too much. Well, he says, it is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live.
Oh,
Isn't that just beautifully put?
wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say.
And I think that's what's so great. It clears, these sayings clear away what's unnecessary and help you, you know, to focus on what really is necessary and meaningful. I'm just blown away. I did not expect Stoicism to be this amazing.
It's yeah, I really like that quote because if you're going to worry about and fear death for most of your life, you're essentially living death.
Yeah.
You're essentially dying instead of living, you know? And I know we all die, and every second we spend in this mortal coil is ever closer to death. Sure, okay, yes, we get that. But I still feel like if we spend most of our time worrying about death, we're not going to, as Marcus Aurelius clearly understood, actually live, you know? Because we're always thinking of that which we cannot control. Oh.
There you go. Light bulb moment.
Yeah.
People, light bulb moment. But yes, I have a fear of of not living to the full. And that's why, I wanted to start this podcast with you. And, when you came to me with the idea, I wanted to do this with you because it's something I really want to do.
Yeah, and
we shouldn't hold ourselves back.
No, and I totally believe that if you feel like you need to do something, you have to do it. And I mean, unless it's like murdering someone or...
Yes, so Stoicism says your actions should have the purpose of the common good for all.
Common good,
The
yes.
common good.
So if you want to do something that's somehow within the reaches of the common good, go for it.
Because if you act for the common good, it will be good for you. So the greatest good you can do for yourself is to act for the good of everyone else.
Yeah, and I do, and this is why... have you heard of superorganisms by any chance?
No.
So I think the term is superorganism. I could be incorrect, and in which case I'm sure we'll have enough letters sent to us correcting us. Always dependable listeners.
Great. I love the old-fashioned letters.
So the idea is that researchers have found that funguses, these huge colonies of funguses, are actually interconnected with each other. And so you'd have this forest as large as perhaps half the Amazon or something like that. Huge hectares of forest. And there'd be like mushrooms, there'd be some funguses, there'd be some like a bit of moss here and there, and so much all over the place. And every single one of those cells, every single one of those fungi are connected to each other. It's like its own miniature, massive, weird, interconnected ecosystem of things. And one change in something anywhere will trigger the whole ecosystem to react. And that's actually kind of, it's not really parodied, but it's brought up in Avatar, the Last Airbender, the cartoon as well. Remember, I don't know, have you watched it?
I love that show.
Yeah, so remember when Aang goes to the forest with the swamp benders, or the weird forest with the weird water benders who are actually part of the swamp?
No, I didn't see that one, actually. I didn't see the
okay.
whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that had the idea where there was this really large tree in the middle of the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, all of the trees outside of that, the whole forest was really connected to that one tree. And so it was almost like a whole ecosystem, And I believe in extrapolation, really, that human beings are pretty much quite similar to that, because if something happens to one of us within a society and some miniature ecosystem, if you will, we're all affected by it. Much like if something happens to one individual in a classroom, the class average goes down in tests and exams. So similarly, if, let's say, in our group of friends, if one of us died, then that would affect the whole group. If one of us got sick, that would affect the whole group. If one of us started succeeding, that would affect the whole group. We're all connected, perhaps not directly, but certainly through every other means, really, right? Because if your friend suddenly became the prime minister, it would affect your friend group.
Yeah.
And if the suburb that you're in suddenly gets richer, it would affect the whole group again. It's all mutual benefit, right? And it's all connected. So that's why I don't really get selfishness, I suppose, because it's temporary gratification. It's temporary success for losing out and much more, I suppose.
Very well said.
Yeah.
Very well said. Yeah, and Marcus Aurelius would agree with you.
Well, I'm glad I got Marcus on my side. Good old Marcus.
Good old Marcus, buddy
Yeah.
boy. He's on your side. So acting for the common good is a way to lead to your own happiness as well. Your sole purpose in your actions should be for the common good, and that's what Marcus Aurelius. What a wise leader.
Yeah.
I wish we need leaders like him today.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be swell?
Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
Nudge, nudge.
Yep.
Another quote from him. No man can escape his destiny. The next inquiry being how he may best live the time that he has to live.
Okay, you'll have to elaborate on that because I don't fully grasp it.
So, we can't control what happens to us.
Yes.
We can't control how life treats us.
Yes.
So, what we should do, and we don't know how much longer we have to live, but what we should do is we should think about how we may best live the time that we have left.
Ah, so it does lead back to his idea about don't be scared of death, just worry about living life in the moment kind of thing.
Because that's all we can do. That's what we have control over.
Yeah.
How we live, how we live this life we are given.
I think, and this is a bit of a tangent, but I think Stoics would be quite, or at least Marcus Aurelius and the other old day Stoics would be quite shocked or terrified at how the world has changed, if only because we don't even have complete control over how we live our lives in the day-to-day anymore.
What do you mean?
Well, see, you need to live. You need to survive the world. And back in the day, all you have to do is... I don't know much about back in the day, but I imagine...
In the day?
I imagine it was much simpler than it is now. Certainly more likely to die and more likely to get the plague and so on and so forth as well.
Yeah.
But generally simpler.
I reckon Rome, was rather complicated, living in Rome. I mean, it was quite a big empire and society, so I think it
That is
wasn't
true.
quite as simple. I think maybe it's more similar than we think.
Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, it's not like we're talking about the Picts from, like, before time.
Yeah,
I mean,
this was
before the
a
Roman
huge
Empire.
society and had a whole social structure, large social structure,
Yeah.
political system, so it was quite messy, actually. I don't think it was...
Well, what do the
so
Stoics
simple.
say about that then? Do you because currently we have to work for most of our week to actually live the little we can live, and so I don't particularly think that we have control over all facets of our living, if you will.
Yeah, and that's what they would agree with you there.
Right.
But since we have to work, how can I best live my days where I'm working in such a way that makes the most use out of this life?
So do you think that, and this is just asking questions, in your opinion, do you think that's somewhat receptive rather than progressive?
Well, I think it's both,
Yeah?
because it encourages you to stay rooted in the present and judge and have clear judgment on something in the present that arises, and then to act and respond to that. So it's all about perception. So let's just say in the present moment, right now, let's just say we have to work.
Yeah.
Can I change it? Do I want to change it? Yes. Can I? No. So then if I can't, how can I best enjoy this and see working in a way that will make life worth living?
Right.
So some people say that sounds kind of morbid, kind of depressing, but it's actually a very practical way of dealing with, some realities in life.
Right.
So if you can control something, go ahead. If you want to, change it. But if you can't, how can you see it in such a way that you can live life the best way?
What if you
Possible.
don't know if you can control it?
You could always find out.
I suppose that was a stupid
Yeah.
question. Sorry. Yeah.
No. And it's all about, Stoicism is all about accepting what happens to you in your life. They don't place value on external things such as health or wealth and pleasure, which they say they're not good or bad in and of themselves. But it's saying that it's all about the mind. It's all about thought and reason. That's where our greatest happiness can be found through virtue, through developing resilience, being able to accept what happens to us, acting for the common good,
Right.
and being able to be resilient, emotionally resilient in misfortune. And so it's saying that we can be free in this life, even with the harsh realities of it. So in accepting whatever happens to us, Marcus Aurelius says, accept whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny, for what could more aptly fit your needs?
He has a way with words, I'll give him that.
Oh, he does. He does have a way with words. And he actually says this same teaching, and he emphasizes it a few times throughout the work in Meditations.
Right.
And there's another line where he says, look closely and you'll see how everything happens for a reason. And you could be like, whoa, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me right now? And it's, I was quite surprised that they suggested that, because they were very realistic about the harshness of life. I mean, Seneca was enslaved.
Yeah.
He suffered a lot. And Marcus Aurelius also suffered as well. And, he struggled with trying to not be corrupted by absolute power and all the and all the manipulations and corruption within the political system in Rome. He had to deal with all of that as well. So that was a different kind of, obviously,
Right,
very
right.
different kind of suffering as
Yeah.
well. I was quite surprised to see that they were quite, to have that teaching of accepting whatever comes as that it happens for a reason, that it's there, or unless that could also be just a way for us to look at things happening. Like, why has this happened? How can I see it as a way that it fits my needs?
It is quite a practical philosophy, isn't it? It's almost like a pocket chunk of, like a pocket-sized philosophy, like a pocket-losophy or something like that.
Pocket-losophy, I
Yeah.
like it.
It focuses on what can affect you and what you can control, and then just decides to not really touch on everything else, because really it doesn't matter, because what can you do about it anyways? So
You got it.
yeah, and it just asks the question of what can you do and what should you do within that time.
Well, there's a lot of wisdom from Marcus, and I know we only briefly touched on a lot of points, but I wanted to hopefully give an overall view of Stoicism and what Marcus Aurelius teaches and how practical it is. So I really encourage listeners to have a look at meditations and to investigate Stoicism further, because it has really great practical applications in life. Hey guys, that's us for another episode. Thank you all for listening. We hope we gave you a smile and something to think about.
If you like this episode, please give us a rating on Apple.
Every 5-star rating goes a long way to help us keep going and reach more people. We really appreciate all your support.
You can find us on Facebook as Confuddled Podcast.
On Twitter at Confuddled_pod. That's CONFUDDLED_POD.
And on Instagram at Confuddled_podcast. Or just email us at confuddledpodcast@gmail.com.
We love hearing from you. Share your comments, queries, ideas, suggestions, lightbulb moments.
And your deepest, darkest secrets.
Maybe not.
So get in touch.
Okay, until next week.